What if I told you that your story could change someone's life? Would you share it? Emerging Beyond.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Emerging Beyond with Acire. I'm glad you decided to join us for this show. We have an exciting show. I am sitting in the room of history. When I tell you I have my tissue in my hand because I'm so filled right now, this show is going to be one to watch. As I stated, we're sitting in history, and if you can see the photo behind me, this is none other than the Reverend Hosea L. Williams, and I am privileged to have this interview. Well, not really an interview, just an intimate conversation with his daughter, Miss Elizabeth Omilami, actress, advocate, activist. What else have you had on your resume?
Mom.
Mom. So it is so exciting to kind of take you on a journey, which is what Emerging Beyond is about. It is how we have emerged beyond those trials and tribulations to get to where we're going, and then to encourage, inspire, and uplift you, the viewer, to know that you too can emerge beyond your situation. Welcome to the show.
Whoa, that's powerful. Thank you. So good to be here.
It is actually the testament of my life, emerging beyond
Yes.
the situations of life. And I'm sure you can tell us some things because you grew up in this house that we're sitting in right now.
Yeah.
And there's so much history here. So first, we're going to find out about you, and then we're going to talk to Miss Omilami about her father and the legacy that she's carrying the torch. She has picked up the torch to his legacy from the civil rights movement, and it is going strong and alive today. So, with that being said, let's get down to business. First of all, Miss Omilami.
Yes, ma'am.
Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, I'm kind of a unique bird. I was born in Atlanta when you couldn't sit on the front of the bus. You couldn't go to the restroom. You couldn't go to the movies. You had to go to the balcony. You couldn't live where you could afford to live. Education was, all these issues were highlighted. And actually was born in Savannah, Georgia. And one day when I was about 5 years old, I remember going to the picture window at our house in Savannah, and there was a huge 12-foot cross on fire in my front yard.
Did you know how old were you when that happened?
About 5 or 6.
Did you know who your father was at that time?
No. He had not become who he was going to become because he was a chemist. Hosea Williams, my father, and at that time, and my mom were living the high life in Savannah. He was the first black person to be hired at the Department of Agriculture as a chemist in the United States.
I just want to say to the viewers, those of you that are watching, the youth, first of all, Mr. Hosea Williams talked about in his own words, and you can look at that on YouTube. I encourage all of you to go to that on YouTube. He was in school. He dropped out of school in the 7th grade. Now, you just heard her say he was a chemist.
Yes.
So take us on that journey, which is talked about in the video. I found that astonishing that he went straight from 7th grade into college.
Yes. Amazing, because he ran away from home, and then he entered the Army. And in the Army, he got a certain kind of education. So he was able to expand his education in the Army, but he still didn't know what direction he was going to go in. And he had run away. He lived in a whorehouse, basically. That's where he ended up, because both of his parents were blind. And in those days, you could not keep your child if you couldn't prove that you could take care of them. So he ran away from home, and ended up being taken care of by these ladies of the night in this house. And they raised him up, they trained him, they clothed him, they adopted him, took care of him. He was actually raised by these ladies. And then he ran away from a fight that he got into with a white guy on the farm. And there was agriculture still involved in his life, because they were basically farmers in that city. When he got to the army, he stayed in the army, served his country for 7 years, ended up being bombed in a foxhole with 5 other men. And when they came and looked in the foxhole, they saw just bodies, so they thought everybody was dead. So they reported everybody in there as being deceased. Well, when they came to pick up the bodies later on, and they noticed that one of them was moving, and they said, this guy's still alive. And he had been there for 2 days. Took him out, took him to the hospital, and God stepped in and saved his life. So right then, there was a purpose for his life in motion. Came back to the United States and was beat half to death because he drank out of the wrong water fountain.
I want to stop you right there, because he talks about our veterans.
Yes.
When our veterans come home, some of them are homeless. That's a segue into later on. But some of our veterans come home and they're homeless. They have nowhere to go. They can't even hardly get public assistance to help them.
It's
and
shameful.
He came home to a beating because of his skin color.
Yes.
And a lot of the youth today, you see that, but you don't really know how much that impacted what we're afforded to in our lives today.
Correct. And that it can still happen to you today.
Yes, we see it all the time.
Yeah. So then our young people wonder, well, where did this come from? And our parents sometimes don't tell our young people, you're living in America. Now have a global point of view. Europe, Asia, Africa, Antarctica, Australia, America. America is a country that has a history that has oppressed and suppressed African Americans and other brown folks for years. So don't think that, Trayvon Martin and the lineage that he represents is new. It's not new, and it's not gone away. And it happened to Hosea Williams at the water fountain, and what happens to our veterans. You can imagine, I don't know if you've ever been in the Army, if you know anybody, what it's like to be on the battlefield and have to kill people for a country that rejects you when you get home.
So true.
So his life began to change at that moment, and he realized, okay, I'm still a black man in America.
Yes.
Even though I've been in Korea War, I've been in this war, and I'm coming home. So he came to Savannah and fought for finishing his education in Savannah.
He said that in the video. He
Yes.
said, I was a hustler. He said, I was a hustler. I was pimp. If you name it, I did it.
The original OG. Talk about OG. Y'all know the OG. My dad was the original OG. I mean, this guy, once he got to Savannah, never had any trouble with cash. Would go away on Friday, come back on that following Monday with just a lot of cash. And I never asked the question. But these men did what they had to do to survive.
Yes.
And so he ended up working for the Department of Agriculture. My mom was head librarian at Savannah College.
Well, many of you want to know, how did he go from 7th grade to being a chemist? He fought for his right, as she stated, to go to college. He said he went to 2 colleges and was turned down.
Yes.
But favor allowed him to meet someone
Yes.
who actually knew someone at a school, and he was able to get into Morris Brown College.
And it was because of the relationships. See, we don't forget that the way things happen is not how smart you are sometimes, or it's not how much money you have, it's who you know. Who do you know that's going to help you move to the next level? And then if you're in a position to help somebody, you didn't get there by yourself. Many, many people had to help you get there. And many people had to help Hosea Williams on his journey to meeting Martin Luther King.
And we're going to talk about that when we come back, because it is a journey, emerging beyond. We're here with Miss Elizabeth Omilami. We'll be back.
I got my boy. It's about 8 minutes of 6 o'clock, and I got your friend on the phone, Dr. Hosea Williams, and let's see what's on his mind. Reverend?
Yes, sir, Mr. Annie Patrick.
How are you?
Lovely, lovely.
He had a lengthy list of driving arrests for whatever. God bless him.
Party Supermarket is the place to go tonight to get you some beer and wine. The only hazard of that is you have to watch out for Hosea. You have to watch out for him so that he don't run over you over there.
While Pat would spend 10 or 15 minutes on the phone with certain people on his radio show, he would get on the phone with Hosea Williams, and they would not stop. They would talk for a half an hour, an hour.
Listen, I truly say that you have earned the right to be mayor of Atlanta or any other city.
All I want to ask the people, please give me a chance. I have earned the right. I've stood up. I've spoke out.
I want my legacy to be remembered as she tried her very best to do the impossible in the face of the improbable. And the people came alongside her and helped her and made it happen and made a difference.
Welcome back to Emerging Beyond. Once again, I am here, and I'm so ecstatic and delighted to be sitting here with Miss Elizabeth Omilami, daughter of Mr. Hosea Williams, Reverend Hosea Williams. Let me get that right. Titles are important. Yeah. Reverend, he earned that right. So I would like to say it has been a pleasure so far as to learning about his journey right up until he gets to meet Dr. Martin Luther King. Now, in the video, Hosea, his own words, he organized a lot of the marches that were taking place. And a lot of times, Dr. King was not at these marches.
Right.
So let's talk about him meeting Dr. King.
Yes. Well, Dr. Martin Luther King said that my father, Hosea Williams, was the man singly most responsible for integration in the Southeast. We would always go out for ice cream on Sunday after church. And they say Presbyterians are the frozen chosen, but we were Presbyterians. We didn't feel very frozen at that time. Went to get some ice cream one Sunday. We're all sitting there swirling around on these stools. Mm-hmm. And the guy tells him, we don't serve no niggas here. Now that was the first time I remember being rejected because of the color of my skin. My father quit his job at the Department of Agriculture, made my mother quit her job at Savannah State College as head librarian. We went from patent leather shoes and lace socks and new clothes and furs and parties to people sleeping on the floor. He began to organize. And that's the skill, Acire, that I think we have lost. Our young people want to do something, but you have to know how to organize a community. And then you have to know where to go from there. After you march, make a lot of noise, how do you really make change? So he used the strategies and the tactics of the boycott, the march, the picketing, the press and the media relations to change the face of Savannah, Georgia. He invented what was called the night march because adults could march during the day because they had to be at work. And many times it was people your age, 16 and older, out there marching during the day leaving school knowing that now is the time, so they would march at night. Well, nobody really wanted to march at night because of the danger, but they did, and they were shot at, and many people gave their lives so we could have what we have today. And he was able to change, get integration in the business community, lunch counters. He was able to get people organized so that they could have better employee benefits on their jobs because there was no union. He was able to get doors open for blacks in many of these companies at higher level jobs. And in 1965, Martin Luther King came to Savannah to speak. And he said, who is this man I've been hearing about? See, your reputation comes before you. What people think about you really does matter. And he met him and said, I need you to come to Atlanta because that's where my headquarters is going to be. Southern Christian Leadership Conference had already been born. We packed up everything, came to Atlanta, lived with my grandmother for a couple of months, and the movement was born.
He said when he met Dr. King, he saw God.
Yes.
And I thought that was so amazing. Even as I sit in this room, which we'll show you a little later, as I look at the pictures of them together, I can only imagine what that felt like to meet this man who is preaching nonviolence and trying to help the community to come together in a time where it was so much discourse. It reminds me of what's going on right now, and that's why this conversation is so important, and it needs to happen on a bigger scale because of the fact that we're being divided in this country. But there is something to learn from your past and the history. As she stated, you have to go beyond just the march 2 and 3 days, and that's what they gave us. They went beyond the march. So he meets Dr. King.
Yes, and he became his role, Dr. King's genius. See, don't get this twisted. Nonviolence doesn't mean weakness. Meekness doesn't mean weakness, baby. It just means what you're going to do. You're going to go out there and get enough guns to fight the United States government? I don't think so. They will take out you and your whole community in a heartbeat. The only weapon you have is nonviolence in the face of violence. It's a weapon that you use to make your point. Now, the genius of Martin Luther King was that he could take the talents of all these men and women around him who were strong personalities type A, constantly fighting each other.
Your dad said he was a pit bull.
Yeah. Constantly fighting each other. And cause them to see a goal and see a moment and all surrender their personal egos and come on one accord and make something happen. That was the genius of Martin Luther King, because there would have been a Martin Luther King without Ralph Abernathy. There wouldn't have been a Martin Luther King without Andy Young, Hosea Williams, Dorothy Cotton, Terry Randolph, people whose names you will never know. And they whitewash the memory of Martin Luther King so that you don't know what a fierce soldier he was. So it was his role, my father, Hosea Williams, his role to go into a city, educate and preach to the people, teach to them, to get them to the point where they would march, and then they would march and they would get beat, their blood would be shed, the press would pick it up and put it on TV.
And they would, let me hold you right there.
Yes.
The power of the media.
Right.
Now, when I first moved here to Atlanta, I'm from Newport News, Virginia. When I first moved here to Atlanta, it was back in the late 90s. And one of the things that bothered me was right here in this area, we moved right here in Decatur, which used to be one of the wealthiest counties in Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And when we moved here, I was walking down the street, and I remember my brother and I never encountered anything. And we're talking about in the 80s, 90s. Two white guys yelled out the window, "You niggers," and he spit. And that was the very first time that I had encountered that. So going back to your childhood and your father, when you saw all of this happening, how did it affect you as a child to know that it's something wrong? We've gone from this big, beautiful house, Savannah, which was one of the ports of the slave trade, but you guys didn't know that.
No.
And how did it affect you?
My life changed. I went to jail for freedom when I was in the 9 years old.
At 9?
Yes. I was behind bars, eating bologna sandwiches, singing freedom songs at 9 years old. My father was such a big figure to me. I was a daddy's girl. I just wanted to follow him wherever he went. So I ended up going to jail with him because he went to jail 101 times. So he actually won a political office, state legislature, from jail here in Atlanta.
He ran for mayor as well.
Yes. So all I ever knew, Acire, was this fight. I thought everybody was doing this. I thought everybody was getting up in the morning, putting on clothes, going out, walking in the street, in the grass, passing out flyers, going to these churches and seeing these wonderful orators come and preach and speak to us and teach us. I thought everybody lived that life. It wasn't until I grew up that I realized there was people having vacations. I never once went on a family vacation. Let me say this, we did have in my lifetime, 2 times we went on a family vacation. My life was all about the movement. And so it affected me in the sense that even after I grew up, I thought you had to fight people to get everything that you wanted. And I was very much aggressive, very aggressive female personality. I think what balanced it for me was the fact that I was an actress. So I had this artist part of me that kind of helped me get grounded. But I can remember looking from the jail cell. The last time I went to jail was in 1987, right here in Atlanta, Georgia, when 300 Klansmen met us right up here at Lake Lanier exit at Cumming, Georgia, in Forsyth. And Oprah Winfrey brought her team to film. And we were locked up, and I was locked up in 1987. So don't think that these things are of the past.
Right.
These things can happen today. People can be arrested for the wrong reason.
Yes.
They hadn't committed a crime, but yet they have to do some time. So when the media would come in and film people getting beat, then Andy Young, here again, Dr. King knew the strength of every man and every woman, will come to town and say, well, if you don't do what we want, we're going to let Hosea Williams and his team tear up this town. And his staff was all huge guys, warriors that had either gone to prison. I mean, they would. The only reason that they were not violent was because of the image and the teaching of Martin Luther King. But they were ready to give their lives. And Martin Luther King said, if you haven't found something worth dying for, you're not fit to live.
I find that with all of our leaders, our civil rights leaders, most of them have been under attack from elected official government, of course, due to the fact that they're trying to make a change. They're coming outside of what they want us to know as the social norms. That's really not the social norms. It's wanting you to really stay in your place. How did it make you feel when you would hear the media portray your dad as an alcoholic, or he was a bad person? I myself even heard that there would be police chiefs would say, if you see Hosea Williams, arrest him. And so how does that make you feel when you know the movement from the inside. You know, my dad is just trying to make a change. He's just trying to make a difference. There are people that come to our house for dinner that are just trying to make a difference, and this is not their character.
I mean, I can remember being lifted up in the air by Martin Luther King, because he would have these staff meetings, and he would take the staff on retreat, because the children of the civil rights movement are all suffering from some kind of post-traumatic stress syndrome. It causes depression.
Yes.
It causes you to be angry and you don't know why. It causes you to dislike your country. It causes you to mistrust people, because it wasn't all white people who were bad, and it wasn't all black people who were good. So you couldn't judge a character. So it caused me to really see life in a way that says, you know, it's not fair. And life is not fair.
How do you inspire yourself?
Through Hosea Feed the Hungry.
When
That's
we come
all.
back, we're going to talk about that and more with Miss Elizabeth Omilami. Welcome back to Emerging Beyond. We are having a very educational and powerful conversation with Miss Elizabeth Omilami, daughter of Reverend Hosea Williams. Now, when we were coming into the break, you were saying how you were inspired. In spite of everything that you experienced, you have to keep yourself inspired, because this journey has been a part of your life. Are there times when you feel like you just want to give up?
Yeah, it's times when I can't get out of the bed. That's why people say, what's Bernice King doing? What are them children of them civil rights workers doing? That's an insult to me. You have no idea what they've been through. To lose both of your parents and be an orphan, Bernice King, for example, you can't judge her, because you don't know what she's been through. You haven't walked in her shoes. You don't know what it's like to have the media attack your parents. You don't know what it's like to see your father in jail and to see your mother having to raise the children alone, or what it's like to see white women dying for the freedom of black people, white priests being beat to death for protecting elderly black people from being killed, what it's like to see people being strangled and lynched and hung from a very early age, and you've got these images in your mind, and yet you're supposed to love America. So this post-traumatic stress syndrome that I've experienced, and the depression that I've experienced, and the fear that comes upon me even today, is only managed, and the frustration of living in America is only managed through service to others.
Yes, yes.
So in 1968, when Martin Luther King was murdered, all of the leaders scattered. The murder was not expected. A lot of people say, well, he knew he was going to get killed, and he knew he was going to be murdered. They didn't know that when he went to Memphis, which he was not supposed to be in Memphis, marching for the rights of garbage workers, that somebody was going to blow half his face off.
When I heard, I knew sort of, but not that deep, but when I heard your father describe that, it gave me chills. It gave me chills. I never knew that part about what happened, and that he went back in to get his coat.
And they asked him, leader, you better get your coat. It's gonna be chilly he was going out to speak for the garbage workers. It's gonna be chilly. And he stepped in they were all there. My dad was there, Andy, Jesse at this hotel, Lorraine Hotel in Memphis. And when he came back out, the shooter was ready. The sniper was ready. Now, the man that shot Martin Luther King was an ignorant man. There was no way he had the capabilities of creating the environment through which he could kill Martin Luther King and get away. So there were many people involved in that murder. It caused a shift in the civil rights movement because it really was personality based.
How old were you at that time?
I was in high school. I was a junior in high school. I was in Utah because they used me to send me around to different schools to integrate those schools if there was no black folks there. So I was at Wasatch Academy in Mount Pleasant, Utah, going to boarding school out there so they could see what black people look like. Now you can imagine the mental anguish of that time in my life. Having to go through people rubbing your skin to see if you're a human being. Are you an animal? And so that's what I was doing. And when Martin Luther King was killed, I came home and went right back.
So you had to serve.
It was my life. I had no choice.
In your life.
Yeah.
I can only imagine a junior hearing it. Then you're somewhere where it's predominantly white. And of course, all the racial slurs that took place. And you had to endure.
And when I got there, what they gave me for a gift was a black sock that they had taken and stuffed with cotton and sewn 2 buttons on for eyes and put red lips on it and arms, and they had set it at my dorm door where I would live. That was their gift to me. They thought that was a positive thing. So purpose comes out of suffering. If you're not willing to suffer, you cannot find purpose. Frederick Douglass tells us nothing comes without pain. And so as a result of that, I began to see life as a very painful place and not a happy place. But I want to make sure our young people understand that don't think this is a black-white against white thing. It's a goodness against evil thing. And you have to be spiritual so you can discern the spirits of the people you are around, because just because they're your same color doesn't mean they're on your side. And just because they're another color doesn't mean they're against you. So we children that grew up in the civil rights movement found out that our lives were not our choice. But when I graduated, I was allowed, and I say allowed because they told you what to do and you didn't question it. I was allowed to go to Hampton Institute.
Ain't you?
Yeah. I was allowed to study to be an actress. And I could hide in the darkness of be afraid. I could become someone else on stage, and I didn't have to be myself and live in that painful place. So the theater became my therapy, and it became my way to overcome what I had been through as a child of the civil rights movement. And I began winning awards all over in the arts and as an actress. And that really saved me at that time, at that young age. So I would say that you have to find that thing that when you're doing it, time passes and you don't even know 3 hours have passed. And I don't mean being on Facebook either.
Right.
I mean something that you're giving yourself to, like painting or drawing or acting or singing or dancing. Dance it out. Sing it out. Because you're carrying something inside of you that comes from your ancestors that they gave you because they knew you were being born in America. So be wise about your life. And when I came out of Hampton, my parents were, it was in 1970, early 70s, I found that unfortunately a lot had not changed.
In watching the video, Hosea in his own words, and as I sit here and look out the window, we are actually in the south part of DeKalb County. This county went from being one of the wealthiest counties. Your father talked about moving out here and having one of the neighbors call him a nigger, pretty much, as if he didn't even belong here. Even though he could afford to be here, he was taught to that way. He worked at the East Lake golf course when he was here. So he served in the midst of the storm, pretty much.
Yes.
He still found time to serve in this community. And right now we're seeing this community transform. It went from being one of the wealthiest counties to having the poor people and low income people move into this area. They built projects just right down the street. And I recall being a young girl and you were told at a certain time of night, you don't go to that side of the street. I grew up a couple of blocks away myself. And for him to have fought for so much and take so many beatings and then say you can't live here and then see the neighborhood transform to something so negative, how did that affect him? How did that affect him?
I think when he passed, he was a very sort of bitter, it was a bittersweet life as he looked back on it. When Dr. King was killed, my father took a walk down Auburn Avenue. And he said, well, what am I going to do now? What's going to happen to our people? And he saw a homeless man eating out of a garbage can. He said, man, this was a Kairos moment in his life. Kairos has changed. Something happens to you one day and your whole life changes. Man, why are you eating out that garbage can? He said, man, I'm hungry. He said, well, let me go in this fish market, Yosemite's Fish, which is still there today, right across the street from Reverend William Holmes Borders Church. He bought him a fish sandwich. The man ate through the paper and everything to get to this food. That's when Hosea Feed the Hungry was born. As my father, if you pray and ask God to show you what you want me to do with my life, He will show you. It might not come when you want it, but it will come. You just have to be patient and keep praying and waiting on the Lord. He went across the street and started feeding 100 men a week at that time. And make a long story short, which I know we have to, is it not our responsibility to make sure that children are hungry in America? I can take you somewhere right now off Cleveland Avenue and show you an apartment complex that's full of hungry children right now in 2018. We opened up our lives then to the poor in a way that we had not before, to the needy. And it's through service that we receive healing. It's through serving others. We used to get so many toys for Christmas, we couldn't even carry them all in a bag when my dad was here at East Lake. But it wasn't for us. He would take that bag of toys and put them in the car, and we'd go over to East Lake Projects and give our toys away on Christmas. He got mad because black folk would dress up on Easter Sunday and go to church and not help nobody. So we started Hosea Feed the Hungry. He started it rather with some other people, Tyrone Brooks, Terry Randolph, and others. And that became his way of healing from the death of Martin Luther King. And that became his new mission. Even though he was a city councilman, he knew Aretha Franklin, God rest her soul. You know, he traveled with these celebrities. He was a DeKalb County commissioner. He ran for mayor. He went from jail to the White House. He served President Ronald Reagan. And all of this, he never forgot the bum in the street. He never forgot that I'll never be too good that somebody can't call me on the phone or come see me in my office, because this saved my life serving others.
The change.
Yes.
Change. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the changing of the guards. We're going to look at this clip as we go into the break of Reverend Hosea Williams saying how beautiful Auburn Avenue was and how he just came here and he was just amazed at the beauty of it and the wealth and the richest black, one of the strongest black banks here in Atlanta, Citizens Trust Bank, and to see a homeless person on the same street, I'm sure, impacted him. And Hosea, as you say, Hosea Feed the Homeless was born. But we're going to come back with more with Elizabeth Omilami and the changing of the guards.
That was the most celebrated black economic era other than Harlem in America.
And the Hosea Williams Tour is more than a drive through Atlanta. It is a look in the mirror at who else.
So this was like paradise to me. But I was one of the playboys. I'd get sharp as a tack. I mean, I was supposed to have been real good looking with slick hair back in those days. And I would come to Auburn Avenue just loaded with beautiful women.
You were scoping babes the whole time.
Oh, yes, sir.
Remember the number 4, Hosea, HOSEA.org. Why? Have you ever opened the refrigerator and there's no nutritious food? For Hosea.org. Moving time and time again, behind on the rent? For Hosea.org. Can't go to the doctor. Can't pay the bill. Well, in Atlanta, Hosea Feed the Hungry is a place of rescue every day all year long for the working poor and the homeless. It could happen to you. It can happen to me. I'm Elizabeth Omilami, CEO of Hosea Feed the Hungry. Join us. You can make a difference at forhosea.org. For a change, together, we can make sure that no child is hungry ever again.
Welcome back to Emerging Beyond. I am here with a beautiful actress, mom, activist, carrier of the torch, Miss Elizabeth Omilami. Going into the break, we were talking about Auburn Avenue and Citizens Trust Bank. When your father describes Auburn Avenue and he talks about the beauty of what he saw when he was bringing his family to Atlanta and the wealth and the riches and black people being educated, and then it transitioned into the homeless. We are seeing a change in Atlanta right now where the areas that were predominantly African American are now suffering a regentrification.
Yes.
Meaning there are a lot of people with low income and homelessness being pushed out of the city. Your journey is taking you right now to pick up that torch of feeding the homeless. And there are a lot of things that you guys are needing right now to continue this legacy. Why do you think, as prominent as Atlanta has become with all the acting and all the jobs and the black businesses, why is it always a lack there? It should be just flourishing with us giving back.
Yes.
Why do you think that it's not as we're not doing what we're supposed to do with everything we have?
I ask myself that question every day to see if I'm going to get a different answer. The answer that I got is that we are not concerned about the poor. We are primarily concerned about ourselves. I have found, and I took over Hosea Feed the Hungry in 2000. What happened to me in 2000 was my father got kidney cancer, and he passed away. But just 2 months prior to that, my mother, who had never been in the hospital for any sickness, got a rare blood disease and passed away. So there you've got the mother gone, 2 months later the father's gone, and there us children are trying to figure out, Lord, why are you punishing us? Because it felt like we were being punished. but it was time for the guard to change. It was, if you put a seed in the ground, then it can be lots of plants. So we came together as a family, and because I was an actress, I was always out of work. So I was the one who knew how you feed 2,000 people at a time. I was, not trying to be no civil rights leader. I was not trying to run no nonprofit, because people talk about you behind your back. They pretend to be your friends, and they're not. They don't like you to ask them for money. They don't want to see you coming. They start running from you. It is not a good job. Even the people who've been around you a long time that you think love you and support you are there for their own reasons. So it is a very wicked, kind of weird person that wants to run a nonprofit. And I'm telling you this because I know you have a mission inside of you. Don't just jump out there and say, oh, I want to do a good thing. Let me just run a nonprofit. If you're not ready to be stabbed in the back, talked about, people running from you when they see you coming. But because we have been raised in it, and it was our lifestyle, it wasn't a job, I just automatically said, well, yeah, I'll take over and do this. I know how to run the Thanksgiving dinner. At that time, we were just primarily Thanksgiving, Christmas, Martin Luther King. We would just do these big holiday dinners, and at these dinners you had the doctor, you had the clothes, you had the legal aid table, you had the kids corner, you had all these activities happening around this dinner in the middle. So I stepped up and didn't know I was going to do it, because I was on my way to LA to be an actress.
That's right.
I didn't know.
Plenty of films.
I didn't know. I've done over 50 films.
Yes.
I've worked with Tyler Perry. I've worked with, I was in Forrest Gump. I mean, you can go and search my name to see my filmography. I didn't know that this meant I had to give up my acting career, but it did. I could no longer be an actress after I decided to take over Hosea Helps. But then I found out that the reason you went to jail when you were 5, the reason that your son got hit in the head with a rock and his head was bleeding when y'all marched on Cumming, Georgia, the reason that you didn't have the normal childhood was because you weren't going to be a normal adult. So all that was preparing me to feed over 50,000 people a year today. We are finding that in these pockets of poverty in Atlanta, there are many, many people who cannot find work. They're one paycheck away from being homeless. If somebody dies or somebody gets divorced or there's domestic violence in the household or some crisis happens, they end up on the street, women in their cars with their children. So then this became the civil rights movement for me. I couldn't get out of it. I couldn't run from it. So it's best to just know when to surrender to life and go with the flow. And so now, today, we have a women's job skills program where, the entry-level jobs are disappearing. Yeah. So we need, this job skills program. We have, of course, Hosea on the Move. You can go to our website, number 4, HOSEA.org. You can register your apartment complex and say, we need food out here. We'll bring the food to you. So we're on the move in the community going in these apartment complexes. We have the holiday dinner events are still going. We do Christmas, children's Christmas party, Thanksgiving, Martin Luther King's birthday, Easter Sunday. We also do SNAP, any federal benefit that you can register for. You can register for that with us. And we provide case management, and our partners provide things we don't provide, like mental health counseling, etc. So this has become the purpose of my life today, even though I have 5 grandchildren. And my son. And your
husband, that's an actor as well.
Husband, yes, he's off right now doing a movie with in LA.
Mr. Afemo Omilami.
Omilami, yes. The kids, you saw him in Drumline.
Yes, you did.
You've seen him in Forrest Gump as the army guy that yells at the Forrest Gump. You've seen him in Trading Places with Denzel. If you saw him, you'd recognize him. So
and he's standing right beside her when she's talking to the community about bringing your funds and helping out, and your time and your energy and your resources to continue to feed the homeless. Granddaughter Portia Williams, many of you know her from Housewives of Atlanta. She comes out and she speaks as well, and her sister, and it's a family thing. It really is. We have to come together, not just as a community, where community is family.
Yes, thank you. Community means family. It doesn't mean you're in your little silo on your Facebook, on your phone all the time. Look up and you will see your purpose. You will see your reason for living, raison d'etre, as they say. Yes, you will see it right in front of you. But if you don't look up and reach out to touch another human being, you can't do it through the internet. You can't do it through any other way but reaching out and meeting a need of another human being on the spot. And that's how you find your healing and your purpose.
Right. That is so true.
And we need young innovators. My son is going to take over the organization when I decide to go and do more activism and more speaking. So we're beginning to pass this on to him. He's in succession training. We need young people that want to make a difference in the world and have this new, quick way of thinking and making things happen. And I'm so glad to be here with you, Acire, because you're a part of that future. You and your producer, you're a part of what will happen, so that how can our children do well in school if they go to school hungry? And many of these children don't eat from free lunch on Friday to dinner on Monday. And I say it over and over again, but we are responsible for our community. You don't live life just to see how much money. You get all that money, I guarantee you 100%. Get the big car, get the big house, get the yard that you want and all the vacations. You will be crying on your bed out of depression because you'll have it all and you still won't be happy. Walk out of your house and make sure a senior citizen has enough food for a week, and you'll sleep in peace. You'll have that power that you want, because it's only through serving others that we find Christ. And if you're not a Christian, if you don't believe in God, you certainly want to sleep and be peaceful. So you see everything going on, and sometimes it's overwhelming. How can I make a difference? It's too much happening in this world.
Encouragement.
If you just do it for one person, it's worth it. It doesn't have to be thousands of people. If you just lift up one family, it's worth it. So I want to encourage you, Acire, and your listeners to know that. Go to number 4, HOSEA.org, register to volunteer, get involved with Hosea Helps, and help us go to the next level. We've just bought a building that we have to renovate. We'll have a home for Hosea over off S85 going south on Cleveland Avenue. That's going to be our headquarters, where we're going to spread out and have a campus of service. And so join us, help us build this building, and help us go to the next level.
One word before we go, uplifting. What does that mean to you?
It means one human being forgetting their needs and picking up another.
And with that, I'm going to leave it at that for my Sincerely Acire moment. We're going to close out by taking a look at some of the beautiful photos. In fact, a sofa that Dr. King actually sat on, I'm sitting right beside it. And as she stated, purpose. You don't know why you're going through something that you're going through. You can't figure it out. I myself had a situation, survivor of domestic violence, and I too was re-victimized by the judicial system, fighting back in the situation. I actually was leaving. That was my fight back, trying to leave someone who was abusive to me that night, and didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know if I was going to go back to the person or leave the person, but I ended up being re-victimized, and it gave me a purpose. It taught me to look at the system we live in a little bit differently and want to help and reach out. And so sitting here with someone who has walked the journey since childhood, whose father has fought for the right of those who cannot fight for others, I know that my purpose and my voice is to help that woman that has said, you know, why am I in this situation when it shouldn't even be me in this situation? My purpose is to do just that, take on the torch from the generation before me, and that's what Miss Omilami has done. She has picked up the torch. We need more leaders out there. We need you, the youth, to know that all things are possible. Mr. Williams started off with just a 7th grade education. He became a scientist. He worked for the government. He actually fed people in the streets. And if he can do it, so can you. So we will see you next time on Emerging Beyond. I love you. Sincerely, Acire. See you soon.
We still gonna take care of the senior citizens, brother. We still gonna take care of the youth that are wandering the streets. The only way you would know which way to go is by seeing the back